Hello, how are you doing? Welcome along to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be reacting to the opening round of the Gallagher Premiership. Yes, it did happen, but I'm also going to be reflecting on the decision-making process we saw from Premiership Rugby all on Friday when we didn't know what was happening. I'm going to be focusing on some of the tactical stuff as well that I think is really important from over the weekend. And also I'm going to be asking, can individual players win you games? Seems like a simple question. I'll get into it towards the end of the video. I've kind of changed my mind on that over the last day based upon what we saw particularly in that Bristol and Bath game. If you're new here, welcome along, like the video, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and let's get into it. Okay, so first of all, independent governance in rugby, particularly in Premiership Rugby. What we saw over the weekend is proof that the game needs it. The game needs it across all different levels, but particularly in this case, in the Gallagher Premiership. And what I mean by that is, following the news on Thursday when the Queen passed away, the big question was, are games going to happen? Now, we saw some sports on Thursday, the Test cricket, the British Horse Racing Authority immediately said everything on Friday is cancelled. And then they made decisions later down the line what would happen on Saturday and over the weekend into the beginning of this week. So what happened on Friday morning, the DCMS, the government department, had a chat with all the sports, FA, Premiership Rugby, cricket, everything, and essentially said, it's up to you. You can do what you want. And then we saw the Premier League and the EFL in football say everything was cancelled over the weekend, and rugby took a lot longer to get to a decision. Now, more stuff has come out over the weekend. There was a really good article by Charlie Morgan in the Telegraph detailing the chaos behind the scenes at Premiership Rugby, and lots of sources, I know other journalists from other papers as well, have spoken about how they were getting a very clear indication that games were going to go ahead, the Friday night games were going to happen, everything was going to be as it was supposed to be before the news on Thursday. But then the football made its decision, and that caused all sorts of chaos. Now, the problem with Premiership Rugby, and the reason that I'm saying it needs independent governance, like a commissioner, if you will, like in American sports, the NBA, the NFL, has a commissioner at the top who has the power and is given the power by the clubs to make executive decisions. And of course, they consult the clubs, but ultimately it falls with them. The reason that this is, it's not a new issue, by the way. This is an issue that has been in rugby and in English rugby pretty much since the turn of professionalism. The reason it raised its head this weekend is because before making a decision on playing that weekend, they had to have a meeting with all 13 Premiership clubs because they're all the stakeholders. They all then get a vote on it, and it's this really convoluted process that means the fans didn't know on the Friday if they had a game to get to. Even media teams and people working within those clubs didn't know if they would have a game, and it just sounded like a complete mess from what you've read in the press, and it hasn't exactly been denied by Premiership Rugby. So therefore, we need someone who can get in there and make a clear and decisive decision. I said in my last video on the channel, I personally don't think there was a right or wrong decision when it came to cancelling games. I think you can have a debate about it, people might disagree, but whatever decision they made was fair enough, you move forward. What it needed was clear and decisive action, and it didn't have it at all. So therefore, that sort of commissioner level, someone like Simon Massey-Taylor, who, by the way, I think has done some really good job over the last year since he came in as CEO. He got more rugby on free-to-air TV, the deal with ITV. Also, we've seen the introduction of Premiership Rugby TV, which is massive. If games aren't on TV now, you can watch them by subscribing there. And the value, I think a season pass is about 100 quid, which gives you everything, all the games that aren't on TV, which is pretty good going. So I think he's done some good stuff. I think his hands are tied at the moment about how much more he can do. And this was a prime example that we need someone like him to be given more power. Is that going to happen? Will the clubs surrender that power? I have pretty serious doubts, but they need to. That's enough of that. Let's park that. Something we will come back to, by the way, on the channel, I'm sure, loads over the coming weeks and months and so on and so forth. But anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on it. On to some more of the tactical stuff that we saw over the weekend. We had a weekend of, I would say, some good games, some poor games. We saw some really poor rugby and some good stuff as well. But one thing in particular to keep an eye on was the kicking. Something that George Ford spoke about at the Premiership launch a couple of weeks ago that kicking is a massive area of the game. And there was a stat, I think Austin Healey said it on BT Sport, that out of all the matches in the Premiership last season, only 2 of those were won by sides that kicked less than the opposition. And I know the top 4 sides in the league, all the playoff teams last season, are the ones that kicked the most. So kicking is absolutely huge. We saw it at Gloucester Wasps, where Gloucester actually, their kicking game was pretty poor at the start of the match. They were kicking it away a lot. Their chase wasn't very good, and Wasps built up that lead before Gloucester came back. But it's going to be massively important over the whole season, I think. I think that is the niche that we're looking at the moment. You know how these things go in trends, I think, in rugby, in terms of how teams attack or how teams defend, or we see tactical things happen that then everyone else copies. The big focus, and what we're going to hear coaches and players talk a lot about this season, is going to be kicking. I was at London Irish against Worcester, and again, kicking was massive there. London Irish's first try essentially came from a Worcester kick that London Irish kept in the field of play, moved it from right to left, found space down the left-hand side, and were able to score in the corner. We're going to have a lot of discussions about it not being particularly entertaining, because at times it's not for a fan. I think it can be really, really intriguing. It can be a really interesting tactical battle. We're going to see a lot of it this season. And then just finally, my final point that I wanted to come on to, I suppose the final question that I wanted to ask and that I posed at the start of the video is, can individual players win you games and pick up points? And I guess what I meant by this, and the reason I asked it and the reason I discuss it, is because I know when Ellis Genge signed for Bristol, I heard a lot of people on podcasts in the media saying he picks you up a couple of wins a season. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable about that when I first heard it, and kind of just thought, I don't really get it. It's a 15-a-side game. That individual doesn't just guarantee you a couple of extra wins. And then the Bristol Bath game happened on Saturday evening, and Ellis Genge was absolutely superb, scored 2 tries, both of them just kind of bulldozing carries. And it's impossible to look at that game and not think, Bristol without Ellis Genge don't win that game. Bristol without Ellis Genge don't pick up the points. They lose to Bath at home in their season opener, which would have been an awful start, particularly after last season where they really, really struggled. So I look at it and I just think Ellis Genge has picked up Bristol a win they wouldn't have got otherwise. His contribution was that impressive. His meters made, his defenders beaten. He was absolutely immense. And therefore, individual players do make a difference. Now, it has to come within a team structure. There are other players in that Bristol team that did great things throughout the game and important things. But those key difference makers, Ellis Genge being one of them, they can pick you up points. And he's going to be big for Bristol. And all sides have them, don't they? But we've already seen it week 1, the difference that he might make to that Bristol Bears side. So that's kind of everything. I mean, there's so much else that I could have spoken about today. Those are the kind of few points that I picked out. Let me know down below in the comments on any of them. What do you think? Rugby and independent governments in the Premiership. Are you pro it? Are you against it? Maybe you don't think it is a good thing. Let me know down below. Any tactical stuff as well. I focused on the kicking, but did you see anything this weekend? And then the final one, can individual players pick you up extra points and extra wins? Ellis Genge did for Bristol. Remember to subscribe to the channel, would really appreciate it. Liking the video has a massive impact as well. And I'll see you next time.